Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Anbiya wa Mursaleen. Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. So usually it's just the sisters who sit in the back, but I guess this is a new thing. Solidarity? Is that what it is? All right. I put these, I'm still trying to figure out why we put these carpets out. So today, inshallah, we're going to talk about the fear prayer. What do you guys know about the fear prayer? Or what is unique about it? Or is there nothing unique about it? We've never prayed it? Okay. 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 Okay, so it is severe circumstances. Now, where those circumstances apply, that's what we're going to talk about today, and how it's actually performed, and what are some of the things that we should be aware of when we're dealing with it. So, oops. There you go. So this is the verse that the fear prayer is based off of. This is in, what is it? Surah An-Nisa, verse 102. And where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when you're with the believers leading them in prayer, let a group of them stand up in prayer with you, taking their weapons with them. And when they have finished their prostration, let them take up their positions at the back, to the end of the ayah, to the end of the verse. What are some takeaways that we can get from this verse here? What exactly is going on in the context of the verse? What's happening here? All right, number one, it's a battle. Okay, so in a battle, what are things that happen? Or when we're at war, what are some things that we need to be aware of?
Being attacked by the enemy.
Oh. Okay, so there are times when I'm in active engagement, right? And there are times when I'm in inactive engagement. What does that mean? Okay, like how? So this is a scenario. We have a battalion, right? And we are actively engaged with the enemy. When you're actively fighting, when you're actually out there, when you're fighting. And inactive would be what? Okay, right. When there's a break, basically when the enemy camps are lined up, right? You know the enemy's there, or sometimes you don't even know that the enemy's there. You're just in defense mode, right? You're in defense mode now. You're preparing for an attack. At that time, this would be considered inactive engagement, and you would prepare for the enemy to attack. So here, what is something that stands out from the normal congregational prayer in this verse? Okay, there's a change in congregation, which is something that normally doesn't happen. Meaning that the congregation is what? Right, effectively there are two congregations, right? Effectively, there are actually two congregations that are happening within one congregation. And what are some benefits that we can take away from that? Or there's no benefit?
One congregation stands and guards while the other is praying.
Okay, I get it. I'm with you, but I'm saying, what are some lessons we can take away from this? Not just the actual fiqh application.
The concept of the integral position and function of the leader.
Okay, so the position of the leader. In this situation, who would lead? Would it be the leader, the general, or the highest ranking officer in that battalion?
Yeah.
Right, so when we go back to imama, when we talked about leadership, we said that imama, when a lot of the madhāhib, they talk about it, it's directly connected to what? It's connected to authority. So a lot of it has to do with position. And that's something that's, again, important to keep in mind. One of the brothers, he had actually come up to me and he started talking about some of the Maliki positions when it came to leadership. And I said to him, I said, where were many of the Malikis? They're in the West, they were in Spain. And what was going on in Spain at the time? They had a lot of Salatin, right? So they had a number of sultans that were constantly vying and competing with one another. So if somebody came into a masjid and just started leading prayer, not only was he taking, religious authority, he was also taking what? Political authority. All right. So, and that is something that is a way to undermine, unfortunately, even in the US, a lot of imams still kind of have that mentality where they believe that, being in the mihrab or, being in that position is the way to show leadership. And in certain situations, it definitely can, but it's not the defunct way that leadership is shown. So over here, the establishment of the leader, what are some other things that stand out for you in this verse?
The more difficult situation gets, the easier Sharia becomes.
Okay, so the elasticity of the Sharia, right? Elasticity of the Sharia in the sense that the Sharia will adapt to the situation. Okay, what else? How come the prayer isn't just delayed?
I just want to say, even on the battlefield, the prayer must be performed.
So the obligation of the prayer, it never stops, right? The obligation of the prayer never stops, even in situations where what? Right, you're literally in death's grasp, right? At that, you are literally facing death. I mean, I'm not really sure how much khushu' you'll have in this situation, but still, the obligation continues to stand. There's nothing that will remove the obligation of prayer. Okay, what else stands out for you guys here? Okay, to stay armed, right? To stay armed. Again, now think about all these things. Even though I talked about how much khushu' will you have, what are some of the steps, all of these steps that are happening? Splitting the congregation into two, keeping your arms with you, having someone guard over you. If we think about it, what is the purpose of all of these individual acts? Right, not just preserving life. Think about it, because right now we're talking about in the state of prayer.
So be ready to engage with the
okay.
enemy.
All right, you might have to break your prayer because depending on the active engagement. But even we'll talk about that. Like, does an individual actually have to break his prayer in this situation? So the other thing is, think about these things individually, breaking the congregation into two, making sure that one half of the congregation is keeping an eye on the other, keeping my weapons on me. All of these things what is the purpose of these things other than protecting life in the context of salah? These are supposed to help bring me khushu'. So so when you have these things, because the thing is, you're already at a high stress level, right? You're in the state of constant awareness of your enemy attacking you. So now that you have a group that's watching your back, how does that make you feel during your prayer? Right? It'll make you feel a little bit better. Again, it's going to be difficult to have complete and total concentration, but all of these steps are there to kind of help bring that person to some sense of concentration and some semblance that he's able to maintain his prayer. What else stands out for you guys here? Okay. So what does that mean? Okay, so this excuse here, is the excuse for the prayer, or is the excuse for something else? Or no? What is this verse talking about? So I definitely agree with you that there is an exception here, but the exception is for what? To actively participate in the battle. Is it an excuse to not to actively participate in the prayer? No. Right, so laying your arms down over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's talking about putting your weapon down. Right, this is the only time that you're allowed to put your weapon down, when you actually have a legitimate reason, right? You need to have a legitimate reason, you need to have a legitimate excuse. So the fear prayer, there are 7 authentically narrated ways on how the fear prayer is supposed to be made. I'm going to talk about one, right? I'm going to talk about one. This is the preferred method in the madhāhib. And again, there are 2 situations. There is active engagement and there is inactive engagement. Important to keep these 2 situations in mind. First, we're going to talk about the unengaged, right? So this is inactive engagement, meaning that they are in defensive mode right now. So what happens is that group 1 prays with 1 rak'ah while group 2 guards. So now we have 2 groups of people, okay? Group 2, where are they standing? Or it doesn't matter? Behind, in front, next to, they're going to stand behind them. So over here, the qibla is this way. The enemy is here.
Oh, so it's where the enemy, where you think?
They're going to stand in between the enemy and their, right? Who are the people who they're protecting, right? So if the enemy is this way, where would the group 2 stand? They're going to be standing in front of them, right? They're going to be standing for, again, they're supposed to be between them and the enemy, because the idea is to give group 1 what? Peace of mind, right? We want to give them peace of mind. So then what happens is that group 1, while they're praying, what is the imam doing? The imam, he's leading them. So in rakat number 1, they're all together. Then the imam stands up. They all stand up for rakat number 2. What happens here? This is where the difference happens.
Number 2, she finished the first rakah.
So here, who's praying now? Oh, group 1. Okay, I forgot. So group 1, what they do is while the imam continues to stand, group 1 completes the prayer individually. Okay, so they complete the prayer individually. They salam out, and then what happens? They switch position with group 2. Group 2 now joins, and what is the imam doing? He's still standing. He's still standing while the second battalion comes in. And what does he do now? He goes into ruku', and what happens?
The imam finishes and the second group finishes the second rakah.
So here's what happens. What happens now is group 1, they prayed how many rakah with the imam? They prayed 1, right? They completed 1 on their own. Group 2, they joined the imam, and the imam is in which rakah? He's in the second rakah. So what they would do is they would complete the entire rakah with the imam. The imam then stays into tashahhud. He goes into tashahhud. It's his second rakah. While the imam is tashahhud, what does group 1 do? Or group 2, I'm sorry. They stand up and they complete their prayer and they make taslim with the imam. So essentially, each group prays how many rakah as a congregation? 1. Each of them prays 1 as a congregation, and then they pray 1 rakah individually. Is it clear or again?
So the imam in the second
One more time, sure.
does not give salam. Wait until they.
All right. You know what? Why don't we do a demonstration? Right. This is a perfect time. Miguel and Nazim. So Miguel, you can be group 1. He's group 1. This is group 2. The enemy is this way.
So then I think this way?
Yes, the enemy is right there. Uthman and the sister sitting down. Right? Oh, he's not on the manhaj. So we got to. This is our enemy. Huh?
Should we go on camera?
On camera. The camera's over there. So I don't know if they can see. Yeah, it's all right. So what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to Allahu Akbar, and now Nazim is going to be praying with me. All right. I'm going to recite a surah, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Allahu Akbar. Now, what is Nazim going to do? Huh? He's going to follow me. Sami Allahu liman hamida. I'm going to come up. Allahu Akbar. And what is Nazim doing? Right? He's still with me. All right? Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Right? I prostrate. Allahu Akbar. Right? So I get up now. Rak'ah 1 is done. Now I'm starting to recite. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Now what should Nazim do? No.
He prays on his own.
Ahsant. He finishes 1 rak'ah on his own. While what am I supposed to do as the imam?
What you're standing waiting for the second.
I continue standing. Right? I continue standing. Nazim is going to complete the second rak'ah on his own. All right? So now Nazim, I don't know.
He stays there.
Okay, so he finishes prayer and I'm still standing.
So
he salamed out. Now you guys swap out.
Oh, and now I come back. One question.
Yes.
When you go up for the second,
Yeah.
you recite Fatiha, or do you wait until he joins you?
No, I will recite Fatiha because they will recite with me, and we'll talk about when loud recitation happens and when silent recitation happens. Okay?
Is this
Yeah.
a 2 rakah there, or you
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. Right now, I'm just showing it as an example. So now, right, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Qul a'udhu bi Rabbin Nas. Yeah, so you start the prayer, right? You start the prayer with me. Allahu Akbar. Sami Allahu liman hamida. Right? Allahu Akbar. We're not praying, man. Allahu Akbar. Right? Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Now I'm sitting in tashahhud. What is Miguel supposed to do?
Get up.
He's supposed to stand up. Right? So he's stand, and now what does he do? He finishes on his own. What am I supposed to do as the imam? No. I wait for the entire jama'ah to get to where? To the second tashahhud when they're sitting. And when I make taslim, they make taslim with me. Yes.
Yeah, that was my.
It's feeling.
No.
It's the Jedi powers. Yes. I'm sorry? Yeah, we all leave salat. So group 2 is going to leave together. Right? So with group 1, what happens? We start together, and with group 2, we leave together. Right? So this way we're actually share part of the salah, right? Either we're going to share the beginning or we're going to share the end. Does that make sense? Okay.
The second, I would say, it's easier to make sense if you treat the second group as someone who can wait. When you come late to the salah, you do exactly the same, except that the imam waits for you. And
Yeah.
the interview, if you're from the back, the imam needs to.
So if we're here, we fight Ahl Bid'ah.
Yes. Speaking of the Fatiha in the second rakah,
Yeah.
would the imam wait? Or would we still going on?
So here we'll talk about the specific prayers and what is supposed to happen. Okay? Because Salatul Khawf, does this replace all the prayers? Or what is it? What happens? So we just do this once and we're good for the day? What am I combining? Dhuhr Nasr and Maghrib and Isha all into two units.
Because you can't combine Asr and Dhuhr and Asr.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, according to Ḥanbali.
In the madhāhib you actually can't. Only the Shafi'is can. Yeah. So, because there are no narrations that the Prophet ﷺ combined for rain or fear for Dhuhr Nasr. All the narrations are for Maghrib and Isha. Only the Shafi'is they say because of Qiyas, but we had talked about it last class. No, the fear prayer is different. Salatul Khawf is different. So Salatul Khawf, and before we continue, is what I want to say is that when you're engaged, right? When you're actually engaged with the enemy, in this situation, what is the setup? Huh?
What's the setup?
Huh?
The setup is
No, if it depends. It depends on which group we're talking about, because some of them multiple engagements work.
Oh.
So, so over here, when we're actually engaged in fighting, right? When you have the 2 battalions who are actively fighting, at that point, how do you pray? Can you pray the way that we did?
No, you can do it on
Yes.
on the video during the battle.
So during the actual battle, whatever way you can pray, that is the way that you pray. Why? Even while you're actively fighting and engaged. So now obviously we don't have sword fights anymore, but being actively engaged, even with the gun, even with the rifle or whatever the situation might be, in that situation you can actually pray. So how does the person pray in that situation? Well, in the madhāhib they talk specifically about nodding. In the madhāhib they talk specifically about nodding. I'm sorry? Oh, yes. So basically it boils down to however he can pray, right? So this individual, it can be walking or riding, it could be facing the qibla or not, right? It's not a condition. It's not a condition. But when they are not actively engaged in fighting, what direction do you have to face? You have to face the qibla, right? You have to face the qibla. But when you're actively engaged, right? When the active battle is happening, then you do not need to be directly facing the qibla. It's not necessary. So in place of bowing and in place of sajda, you can actually just nod in its place. You can just nod in its place. It's not necessary to do all of the direct movements. So does this prayer take the place of the 5 daily prayers? What do you guys think? You just do this once and you're good for the day. Huh?
It's a place of-
So does the Salat al-Khawf, does it take the place of the 5 daily prayers? Or what is its role? What is its function? What is its relationship?
So it takes time for Zuhr.
Uh-huh.
It replaces Zuhr.
Okay.
Pray after.
Okay.
Afterwards,
Okay.
if you're able to.
So basically what you're saying, Salatul Khawf is not a prayer in and of itself. It's just a method to pray the obligatory prayers. Yes? Yes? Yes. And that's absolutely right. Right? That's exactly what it is. So it is a method to praying. It is not actually a replacement. So this makes sense for the 5 daily prayers, except which prayer is going to be problematic? Maghrib. Why is Maghrib going to be a problem? Because there's 3 rak'at, right? So how you divide those rak'at, this is where it would become slightly problematic. The other prayers, how do we divide them? You divide them 2 and 2, right? So you would break them into 2-unit prayers each, which isn't necessarily a problem. Which ones do you read out loud? The ones that are normally read out loud. And which ones do you do silently? The ones that are normally silent. Is there an exception for that? Okay. In what? Right? So if you're surrounded by enemies, right? Like, would it make sense to give away your position? No, right? So again, it's something that's important to keep in mind. So what is the criteria to pray the fear prayer? In what situations can we pray, right? This was the question. One we already know is active battle, right? So when there's active warfare, this is a time where a person can actually use this prayer. And does it apply individually, or is this something that the state says, okay, hey guys, we're doing the fear prayer? Right? It can be a mix between the two, depending on the situation. Meaning that once we decide, or once the state decides we're at war, right? Once the state decides we're at war, I as an individual, I might be in a situation where I'm not really sure what's going on. At that point, I can make a personal choice, right? I can make a personal choice on how I want to do it. And because it becomes an individual risk assessment. And that's something that's important. It's not that, I was going swimming and I was afraid, you know what I mean? And you do the fear prayer. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. But it is a mix between the two. And this is something, again, that's important to keep in mind. Yeah.
Can we combine?
Mhm. Yes. Right. So you actually can combine. You can combine, and depending.
Or is
it depends. It depends. So the thing is, it's basically a concession, right? What is the fear prayer? It's a concession in the way to pray congregational prayer, right? That's what the concession is. Now, whether I want to apply that concession or not, who decides that? Right, I have to decide, is this something is it a good idea to take advantage of? Because the concession can be what? I can either pray early or I can pray late. So everyone needs to decide at that point, okay, is it better for us to pray earlier or is it better for us to pray later? Okay. So Maghrib, actually, I'm not 100% sure. I wouldn't know. I would imagine that one group would pray 2 rak'ah with the imam, right? One group would pray 2 rak'ah with the imam and one group would pray 1. How the imam divides it would be up to him. So he could tell group 1, for example, like, okay, hey guys, you're going to pray 2 rak'ah with me. And then group 2, you're going to pray 1, or he could do vice versa. I'd imagine you have a choice in that situation. Like the Friday prayer. What do we know about the Friday prayer? Yes, go ahead.
So this is outlandish, but let's say,
The fear prayer isn't exactly normal. As
No.
it's not hope, is it exactly like a normal situation? Yeah.
Situation. Okay, let's say you mentioned swimming.
Yeah.
Let's say you're swimming, you're gonna drown, and you're just like, I want to make my awesome prayer before I drown or something.
Yeah.
So you make that prayer.
Yeah, but the thing is, so the fear prayer, where does it apply, honestly? In what situations would the fear prayer, like how would you utilize the fear prayer? As an individual, as a congregation? Right, Right? It's more of a congregational setup. It's not something that you really need to worry about as an individual, because as an individual, if I'm on the plane and there's no place for me to stand and pray, what do? I pray sitting. Right? I don't have a choice. There's no space. There's nothing I can do about that. If I'm drowning and it's time for prayer, right? And the thing is, like, this is something that's really on my mind. Like, I might die here. I might die here. And what should I do? And the last thing that comes to mind is what? My prayer. So what do? I'll try to pray at that time. And how am I going to pray? Like ruku and sujood. Right? No, yeah, obviously you do the best you can. You do the best you can. But like I said, the fear prayer is generally a description on how to make the congregational prayer when I'm in Jama'ah. Okay, so there are two major examples that the scholars use when they talk about the fear prayer. One, like we said, is in active war, in active battle. Other one is if we're traveling through a place where it's known that there are highway bandits. You guys know highway bandits? Yeah. Right, so alhamdulillah, it's not really a big problem here in the US, but if you go into a lot of third world countries, there are areas that are completely dominated by, what do they call it? Warlords. Right? And even in South America, right? There are areas that it is actually dangerous to drive through because there are warlords there. In those type of situations, I would say it's completely reasonable for people to pray like that. As for like rain and all these other, no, I would say those are concessions for combining, but I don't see them like why would I need someone to watch over me while it's raining? Or while it's hailing. I think those are reasonable concessions to combine, but I don't think those are reasonable applications for this. Like fear is a actual fear of what? And not just death, because like, we could fear landslides and things like that, but actual death by at the hand of another.
Animals that could attack.
Oh, animals?
Like really?
Yeah, like sure. I guess, I don't know.
Or what if someone needs to protect from something, from natural,
like a natural disaster, like a landslide?
I mean,
maybe, I guess.
There is no enemy per se.
Yeah. But there's a fear of like something overcoming you.
Yeah. They could stand and watch it.
Actually, no, that's reasonable. That seems reasonable. So like any situation where you need to keep an eye on it, right? Whether it be in the state of war, whether it because of theft or natural disasters, right? Because sometimes even we have simpler natural disasters like hurricanes. So what happens with hurricanes is like you need people to keep putting up the sand. Why do they put up the sandbags? To protect them from flooding, right? So, just to make sure that there's no flooding happening and they can actually, kind of protect each other and keep an eye on each other. But, and Allah knows best, yeah.
So the way you demonstrate it is when the Qibla is this way.
Yeah.
Or if the Qibla is this way.
Yeah.
But the enemy also is on the opposite side.
Okay, so you just have group 2 stand behind you looking this way.
Okay.
That's all. Because the idea what group 2 does, they actually defend group 1. Regardless of the direction of the enemy, regardless of the direction of the Qibla. The only reason we use the example of the enemy and the Qibla being in the same direction is because they're actually standing in front of the Imam, right? All other situations, they're not going to be standing in front of the Imam. So the Friday prayer. Who has to pray the Friday prayer? Who must make Jumu'ah? All right, so the resident. Does the traveler need to make Jumu'ah? No. Who else doesn't need to pray Jumu'ah?
Same man, male, same
yeah.
adult, Greek.
Right. Dhakr, baligh, aqil, hur, and what was the last one? A Muslim, right? yeah. Obviously, you have to be Muslim. You obviously have to be Muslim, right, in order to be obligated to pray Jumu'ah. But so he summarized it by saying everybody who is obligated to pray. Everybody who's obligated to pray. And then he talks about exceptions. But all of those things that you said, like a person who is an adult, right? And we define on what an adult was. Anybody who is sane, right? We define on somebody who is sane. And this person has to be a Muslim. So those are the 3 major ones. He has to be a resident, like you mentioned. So over here, he lives in a permanent dwelling. Why is this condition important? And what is a permanent dwelling? So if like you're homeless. If you're homeless, you're actually not what? Right? No, why not? No, why is that? Because you can get up and like, you're not established there, right? Does that, you're not actually a resident, because at any point in time, what can happen? right? You can just get up and move, or or somebody's gonna move you, or somebody's gonna move you. But this is talking about in the context of mostly Bedouin Arabs. So the thing with Bedouin Arabs, what would happen? They'd move depending on the water, right? They would move depending on where they would find water. So if there's no water in a space, what would they do? Right? They would get up and move. And can you move permanent structures? No. So a permanent structure is indicative of what? Of residence, of not just residency, long-term residency, right? Because the thing with tents is they're indicative of short-term residency, because the reason you have a tent is why? So you can get up and go, like whenever you have to, versus permanent dwellings, which are indicative of long-term residency. And he lives no more than 1 farsakh, and we talked about the difference of opinion on farsakh before, 3 miles from the masjid. Okay. So why is this distance important? Why is this distance important, and why did they place it? I think so. Okay, because it has to do with difficulty of traveling to the masjid, right? And that's exactly what this entire discussion revolves around, right? The difficulty in getting to the masjid. So is this applicable? Would we say the same thing applies today? Or what kind of distance would you guys think is reasonable? 3 miles is good? It's like I chose my house 3.01 miles from the masjid, right? Just so I wouldn't have to go to Jummah, because the khutbah are really bad.
I've heard one more than one from American.
Yeah.
If it takes you more than 30 minutes to drive, you're exempt. According to that.
Okay. So what do you guys think? Is 30 minutes a reasonable amount of time?
I would say an hour.
You'd say an hour is okay? That it would still be an obligation on that person? Because we're talking about obligation now, right? We're not talking about what's better. Some people, they can live an hour and a half from the masjid, and for them, it makes no difference. They're still dedicated, and they'll still go. May Allah reward them. But when we talk about obligations, we have to, Like we have to set realistic parameters for people. Like at what point would we consider it a real hardship? You think 1 hour would be tough? Okay. Yeah. And yes, go ahead. Yeah. So this is something, there's like a big difference of opinion on what actually constitutes a masjid. For some scholars, they won't even allow rented spaces.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. It's like you got to run that. You know what I mean? No. It's like, so there are a lot of places like they won't even allow rented spaces. Like and that's something that's important. Like I think it's the madhāhib. They're like if it's rented, you can't establish Jummah there. So like ownership, quorum, which we'll talk about also, like the minimum number of people. Like some of that, if you don't reach 50 people, like if you don't have minimum 50 people, your Jummah is not only can you not make Jummah, if you made it, your Jummah would be invalid. So you have very restrictive limitations on those things. But let's just for ease sake, let's assume, because there are certain spaces now that like even I know that where they only make Jummah, right? They don't make regular prayers. So some of the places that I've even led Jummah, it would be like it's like a restaurant, and they rented it out for Friday because there just isn't enough. There aren't enough masajid to cater to all of the people who want to come and attend the Jummah prayer. So in those situations, yes. Oh, okay. So it's important to always keep in mind that all of these spaces and all of these limitations and all of these restrictions, they're definitely there, and a lot of them that have talked about them and discussed them. But sometimes these discussions, either they happen in a vacuum or they'll happen with something happened and this was like a reactionary ruling to that. Right? Does that make sense? Like something came up, an issue came up where somebody was like, well, I live more than 1 farsakh from the masjid, and it's very difficult for me. So they're like, you know what, we're just going to make it 1 farsakh. That's going to be the limitation for that. Or the 40 people, like when we get to the quorum, the minimum amount of people, again, it was a reaction to something. Like, how do we determine this? Like there has to be some kind of limitation. because everything has limitation. Some of them would put limitations on, like, if we're praying in the desert, how long can the first row be? Because technically everybody can be in the first row, right? Like, you can have a first row that's like a mile long. Like, are there limitations to that, or can you just keep going? You know, so these are, sometimes they're theoretical discussions, sometimes they're actual discussions, but it is important to kind of keep all this stuff in mind. Did I get lost in the question? What was the question again? Oh, what constitutes a masjid? Yeah, we'll definitely have that discussion, inshallah. We'll definitely have that discussion, but maybe we can put it off for another time. But in the meantime, basically any place that we're praying now, we will consider that a eligible space to make Jummah. So who's excused? So basically there are two types of excused people. People who are always excused, meaning regardless of what the situation is. And then you have conditional excuses. You have conditional excuses. So those who are always confused, women, slaves, and travelers. These people will forever be excused. And not only are they excused, they will never count toward the quorum. Quorum is the minimum number of people that can attend Jummah. So even if I have 3 men and let's say I have 50 women who come, can I make Jummah in the madhāhib? I can't. Why? Because the people who are attending, they're forever excused, right? These individuals are forever excused, and that you cannot count them toward that quorum. But if there are people who come and they're ill, there are people who are come and they're ill or they're sick, these people will actually count toward the quorum, because once I step into the musalla, the Jummah is now an obligation on me because I chose not to take the concession. But the moment I stepped in, it is now an obligation. And because it's an obligation, I can actually count toward the number of people that are there. Rain, fear, you know, this would all fall under the same category. Any questions on these?
Could you repeat on the step in, who are those people?
So, I'm sorry.
You said someone who are exempt, but if they show up, they cannot live anymore.
Oh, so it'd be these people.
Okay.
It would be these people.
Okay.
So these like any of these individuals who show up to the masjid, like for on Friday, they are now obligated to pray because they're there. So it's sickness, rain, and fear.
I've got a question.
I'm sorry?
I've got a question.
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious, like, you know, about slaves, like nowadays, who qualifies as a slave?
So conditions for validity of the prayer. No, I'm just. That's a significantly longer conversation, right? That's a significantly longer conversation. For all intents and purposes, there are no more slaves. For all intents and purposes, there are no more slaves. They might still be practiced in certain pockets of the world, but in general, slavery has been abolished, at least legally, in every country in the world today. Okay. No, and I'm saying, like, for somebody to be a slave to the debt system, or this is more metaphorical slavery, meaning that I still have the right to make my own personal decisions, right? I still have the right to own things. So while I might be debt to the banking institution, right? Like I might be a slave to the banking institution, or I might be a slave at work. Does that mean that I can't quit? Right? Does it mean that, you know, I don't have to pay back those debts? No, I still have those actual choices. So even that person would be considered free, even though we would say, okay, well, metaphorically, he's a slave.
That's not he himself or herself. That's not the law to the bank.
Yes, exactly. That person isn't like, you know, that person can still have property. Person can still own. That person can still marry, right? That person can still do all those things. And this is something that can't happen for a slave unless, you know, it's for permission or there's some kind of agreement, which is called mukataba. And when we get there, inshallah, we'll talk about it. So the conditions for the validity. Number 1, the time. When is Jummah? Depends on the madhab. Allah Akbar. Okay, so basically when the sun clears the horizon, right? Completely. So we had talked about this before. So we said this is what time here? This is Fajr, right? This is Fajr time. Fajr is like right here, depending on the angle of descent, right? But basically this is Fajr time. And now I've gotten up to this point. This is what? Huh? Right. This is the zawad time, right? I'm not allowed to pray at this time. I'm not allowed to pray. Not allowed to pray. Not allowed to pray. Not allowed to pray. When can I pray? Can I pray here? No. When can I pray now? Yeah, I can pray now. Once the sun has completely cleared the horizon, at this point I can pray. And this time is known as what? Right, this is known as Dhuha time. And if I make it in the masjid, this is known as Ishraq. Right, Dhuha and Ishraq, same thing. It's only like if I make it in the masjid or not. And this time, this Dhuha time, it continues until when? Right, it continues until Zawal. Zawal is when the sun reaches its peak. After it moves away from the peak, this is what? This is Dhuhr. Right, so Jummah time will continue in the madhab. Jummah in the madhab, it starts from here. So technically, I can make Salat al-Jummah at like 7 a.m. and I'm good until when? Until Asr. All right. The Hanafis and the Shafis, they say it is only Dhuhr time. This is the only time you are allowed to make Jummah. Why? Because it is a replacement for Salatul Dhuhr. And that's why you can only make it at that time. The Hanbalis include the Eid time. There's a hadith on Jabir, and it's kind of muhtamil. It's you can understand it both ways to mean either before Zawal or after Zawal. So I mean, I'm not fully convinced. But and then the Malikis, they say ila ghurub shams. So you can actually make Dhuhr. I mean, you can make Jummah in the Maliki madhab from the time Dhuhr starts all the way until Maghrib. The place that you can make Jummah, it has to be an established place, meaning, again, back to what we had spoken about in terms of tents and dwellings, it has to be an established city or an established village. Quorum, there's, as you can see, a nice range of ikhtilaf, with maximum quorum being 50, minimum quorum being 2. The reasoning for the 40 quorum and the 50 quorum is there are certain narrations from the Tabi'een asking the companions how many people were there at the first Jummah. So when Jummah was first established, how many people were there? And they said, well, there are like 40 companions who were there that attended. And they said, okay, well, if that's 40, this is the reason that it's obligated to have minimum 40 people. 12, the Malikis say 12. The reason they say this is because when Surah Al-Jumu'ah was revealed, and the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَتَرَكُوكَ قَائِمًا, and they left you standing. Everybody left except 12 people. Right, 12 people stayed with them, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't step down from the member to say, okay, we got to pray Dhuhr now. So they're saying that 12 is enough to establish the quorum. 3, because this is the meaning of a jama'ah. The Hanafis, they say 3 plus the imam because you're addressing a jama'ah. And the Zahiris, they say 2 because anything more than 1 is jama'ah. So this is the reasoning that you have for all of this. It is what it is. I mean, I don't know what to say. So 2 khutbahs. This is the Maliki Shafis and the Hanbalis. They all agree that there have to be 2 khutbahs for the Jummah. The Hanafis say that the first one is an obligation and the second one is a sunnah. And the Zahiris, they say you don't need the khutbah. You just pray 2 rak'ah and you're good. These are the conditions for the Jummah in the madhab, right? So praising Allah, sending salat and salam on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reciting a verse, giving one warning, just even saying ittaqillah, and it's recommended to do it on a minbar, on a raised space, so that everybody sees you. This khutbah can literally be about 30 seconds or less, and you're done. Saying that, a lot of imams, myself included, go a little bit longer than 30 seconds. Alhamdulillah. So this is something that's really important to keep in mind. But also it's important to remember that the Prophet ﷺ, between the 2 khutbahs, he what? Right, he sat. So it was actually long enough for him to need or necessitate a break between the 2 khutbahs. Any questions on any of these? I mean, there's things I would recommend that people don't talk about on the minbar. What is the purpose of the khutbah? I guess this is a good tangent discussion.
Give people motivation for the week.
Okay, to motivate people for the week, like a wow. Jade, I like that. What else? Is it an opportunity for a lesson? Should I start teaching this in the khutbah? Huh? Right. Should I teach the people the ahkam salat al-khawf, where it applies, when it applies? I can set up a series, like a series of khutbahs.
You can, but you'll be, you won't make the money.
I won't get this. Right? I'll be giving khutbahs to myself. I think motivation is good. What other reasons do we have to give khutbah? So you guys don't think a lesson would be appropriate? No. I'm sorry? Okay, a reminder of something, but a lesson is not appropriate. Okay, so we have right now motivation, reminder. What else? Yeah, vote for a congressman. Okay.
Inspired to do the good.
Inspirational. Okay. So even these topics that you guys chose, why did you choose these topics in particular? What is the thing that links all of these things?
I had a Quran which talks about
للصلاة يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم. There's nothing specific in the verse. I'm just asking you. You guys said very naturally that these are the three things that come to mind, and it was very clear to you, like, okay, no, a lesson is not appropriate.
because this is one of the reasons why people come to Jummah. Leave a lot of things to come to Jummah.
Okay, so when people leave to come to Jummah, they're sacrificing, they're giving up something for sure. Because do people need to come? And I'm not talking about like religiously. I'm talking about very essentially me as a worker. What is motivating me to get up and leave and to go and skip my lunch many times? All right, I know it's an obligation. So this is the thing that's making me come to the masjid. Saying that, do you guys have an idea of the percentage of people that actually come for Jummah from the community? They've done a few surveys. It's like less than 20. I think the low percentages is like 7 to 10. Like, so the larger community, right? We have the larger community. Out of the larger community, like, so the people who identify as Muslim and who are Muslim, no, hopefully they're not mushriks. These individuals. These individuals they're like 7% of the population, right? They're like 7 to 10% of the population. Right, so there's 7 to 10% of the population, meaning that there's a good number of people who actually aren't coming. And everybody, I'm sure they have their reasons, whether justified or not. But saying that this 7 to 10% that are coming, these individuals, are they coming because they want a lesson or a class? No, they're coming because they want to fulfill an obligation. So in order to motivate these people, these are why you mentioned the things that you did, right? These people are voluntarily coming and they're spending some of their time. And how long do you guys think a khutbah should be, ideally? Huh? 30 seconds, Allahu Akbar. Okay, 15 to 20 minutes is a very common number that I hear from a lot of people. Why? Why 15 to 20 minutes?
It has to do with human nature.
Okay.
It's kind of attention. It's great to listen for him, but I can't typically.
Okay, so if I'm voluntarily coming, I'm leaving my lunch break, right? So I'm probably hungry, and I'm coming to this khutbah now. My attention span is going to be limited. And what kind of attention you guys feel 15 to 20 minutes is a reasonable attention span where I'm practically taking things away. And like I said, this is nothing that, we don't have a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, like don't give khutbahs based around lessons, right? Or don't give khutbahs longer than this time. So what is the thing that pushes individuals to use khutbahs as opportunities to give lessons, which you didn't feel is appropriate, or reasons that they hold people, I call it spiritually hostage? Why do,
Sometimes this is the time that you have, again, it's the time that the population, the attendance is increased by people who don't normally come to the masjid.
Okay.
And also in terms of time relevant, that's relevant, I think also to the population and the people that you're serving.
Okay.
But I know some population that a 15-minute khutbah is not their custom, and they would be opposed.
So I actually gave khutbah at an Egyptian masjid one time, and I was like, "How long do you want the khutbah to be?" He was like, "Yeah, just don't keep it too long." I was like, "Cool. How long?" He's like, "Yeah, 45 minutes to an hour."
Yeah, too long.
Huh? Yeah, and
I go to
yeah.
and I give a khutbah some places, and I follow my phone here, 15 minutes, And the people who normally used to go about being 45 minutes,
Yeah.
they come 30 minutes late and Juma's open. They're really disappointed.
So this is the thing that bothers me. People who are asking for the 45-minute to an hour khutbah, they're actually not what? They're actually not attending. Why do they want the longer khutbah? Just to catch the prayer.
They want the 45-minute so they can attend the
So they can attend the 5-minute prayer, right? So that they can attend a 5-minute khutbah. And I've had brothers express that, saying that, hey, we want the khutbah to be longer. So I said, okay, cool. Like, I'm really glad you enjoy the content. But if you don't mind me asking, like, what part of it no, we just missed a prayer. So I said, oh, okay, so I should punish the people who are actually coming on time for you, instead of you learning to readjust your schedule. I don't think it's fair. I think 20-minute khutbahs, like you guys said, are very reasonable. I think it's enough to give people an opportunity to actually absorb some of the information that's there and keep them motivated to come back the following week.
Like, I want to learn something.
Yeah.
Go get books. Open YouTube,
Yeah.
chill, YouTube.
Yeah, and not just that. A lot of it has to do with my mentality. Like, if I'm coming from work, is my mentality to be like, all right, yeah, I'm about to go learn something. Like, I'm about to go take a lesson in this. No, having the mentality to take a lesson, a person is prepared to sit for like half hour, 40 minutes to an hour, sometimes hour and a half. Why? Because they know in their mind that this is going to be a lesson. And when the khutbah goes too long, it's actually something that's very jarring for a lot of people, because they're like, what happens is after 20 minutes, what do they start doing? They start looking at their watch, they start sleeping, they start checking their Facebook. And the thing that bothers me is, like, the moment an individual looks at his watch, what has he done? He stopped listening. So the quorum has to be maintained through the entirety of the Jummah. From the time the Imam starts, meaning from the time that the adhan ends, and when the Imam stands, this is the beginning of the khutbah. The moment quorum drops, he himself has to get down and pray Dhuhr. Yeah. So Allah protect us and give us quorum always. I'm sorry. If you're in Ḥanbali, you might be excused from Jummah, because you're probably not in, like, depending on what situation. Yeah. No, Allah protect us. So khalas, we'll end here. Inshallah, if you guys have any questions, just take note of them now, and then we'll deal with the questions at the beginning of next week's class. Jazakumullah khair. Allahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.